Okay, I am live. So that's the first hill to conquer here. I am live. First, I want to send this out if I can figure out how to, because Lord knows there's a trial every time. With an easier way to actually like send this out. I wonder if there's a way to do it. Actually, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to put a little thing in my Cobblestone Kingdom page, and if someone says they want to see it, I'll figure it out. Give me a second, folks. One of those things where I know that Facebook really doesn't want people away from the site. So they're also trying to make it really hard for me to actually send out the message. Maybe if I send out, I'm going to try to send this out and we'll see what happens. No idea if this link will work. We'll see. Yeah, maybe that's a bad idea. Okay, I'm going to delete that link. I don't know if that'll work. Okay, I'm just going to talk, and then I'll put it up as a video later because I'm burning some time here. I don't know why it's so much easier other times. In any case, so I'm going to talk a little bit tonight about a couple of things that are related. The first one is related to last week, where I talked a little bit about power structures and about how I kind of reclaimed the abuse narrative. The abuse narrative of Cinderella, where there's no safe space for Cinderella, not even at home, was really hard for me in all the adaptations I've ever seen. So that was one thing that I really had to change for this adaptation to work for me. Um, and I think it did work because I think it's actually a stronger story when a lot of the things that oppress the Cinderella character Seven are more internalized. And I think that's something that queer people deal with more than heteronormative people, is how we internalize specific messages even if we know they're not great. um, Not to say heteronormative people don't have that issue, especially heteronormative women. Um, but as queer people, we have voices inside ourselves, and no matter how much we love ourselves, we still don't always make good choices. And those are voices that come from power structures, and sometimes they come from very close power structures. And I wanted to keep that. I wanted to keep the idea that Seven, who is the Cinderella analog, is just having a lot of trouble. You know, a lot of trouble being able to move on and progress in life. There's a sense of waiting, there's a sense of longing, there's a sense of maybe not completely having grieved their parents. Um, but I didn't want it to be like a cruel, oppressive regime, monarchy type of thing. Um, it was really important to me that I keep kind of that 97 Cinderella sensibility with Whoopi Goldberg and Victor Garber, where they are in charge, but like they're not evil monarchs. We have enough evil characters already in the story. I didn't need it to also be a thing. I didn't also need it to be a thing where the king and queen were bad guys. In fact, they're not, and they're more active participants in the story in some way. Which is something that was important to me, was that everybody in the story, even though it is a slightly well-known story itself, is the idea of actively participating in choice making. A lot of what the prince fears comes from what's going to happen if I make certain choices. It's not quite a Peter Pan syndrome, but it has a lot to do with, you know, a fear of actually connecting and a fear of what that means and accepting responsibility, a fear of what that means for maturity. Um, and it was really it was really great to work through a Cinderella where I didn't have to cringe, because the kickoff to the second or third act was Cinderella getting dress ripped apart by evil stepsisters. I wanted there to be a sense that even though people were questioning things, that it was still a place of safety. That's part of the fairy tale thing that I think can work really well or could really fall away by the wayside. It's hard to say. Um, I think this version of the story is the best. There's a reason it's taken so long. It's because traditionally theater takes longer um, than a solo project like a TikTok. It's all about collaboration, and a part of version 3 is how it's going to translate once I've got people up and moving. It's different than a table read where people are just reading words. Um, Not to say there's not value and instruction in that, because I've done that and it's a lot of fun. There's something about the way people will move in the universe that might change things slightly. But the overall story is there, and I think it's really great. I think it was really important for me to keep a monarchy power structure. For me, the monarchy doesn't really have a replacement in Cinderella. I think that's why most Cinderellas, even kind of some of the more modern takes, still keep a hierarchy. The best Cinderella, not set in, medieval night times, is really a Cinderella story, the one with Hilary Duff. But even that has a structure built into it and a hierarchy because she's in high school. I'm not discounting that. I'm just pointing out that, the best version of Cinderella being Ever After, a Cinderella tale, with Drew Barrymore, doesn't lean into that as much, but it keeps the narrative of the kind of household restrictiveness there. So there's always a power structure in Cinderella, and I just kind of refined it, and I added that internal dialogue, which is part of criticism that some people give sometimes to, the 50s Disney cartoon Cinderella, was that it was just seemed like she was waiting for the prince, and that she really wasn't doing anything. And for one, I don't think that's a valuable reading because it's a fairy tale. So first of all, you're looking at it with 2021 goggles, and it's not to say it can't be adapted in a way that works, but I think if we look at like the Beauty and the Beast live action that they did with Emma Watson, a lot of them trying to clean up and make the story more PC actually damaged it, because it ended up taking away a lot from the story itself. And that's not to say that things don't get changed, though. Turning it into something where it's very openly queer, where there might be trans people or people using less heteronormative gender pronouns, it means that some things may change. My version of Seven in my head, in which I think it's actually kind of important to have a slightly more feminine Cinderella, even if you're casting someone who's male presenting, may actually be androgynous, maybe more feminine. It may end up working better as a sapphic love story, which is still queer. So that's fine with me. But I think it's really important to do an adaptation with intention, which is what I always talk about in my art, anyways. And I think you can tell adaptation by how people adapt things. And if they say, well, it's the same story, but I just set it in here, that's not a strong enough adaptation for me. An adaptation makes a case, it says something, and it doesn't just slam dunk on the material because we think we know better than, the Brothers Grimm or Disney or something like that. It always means something. And this means a great deal to me as a queer man, wanting something really special to give the world. A gift of two same gender presenting characters finding love in spite of their doubts. And I think that's really important, that I didn't just throw away everything because I'm afraid of an adaptation style. Really was embracing what I loved about Cinderella while being able to rework or cut out the things that made it a really hard story to either enjoy or to participate fully in. There's some really great sequences in that 50s Cinderella. The whole Sing Sweet Nightingale sequence with the bubbles is great. But it's not necessarily story, it's more of the aesthetic, it's more of the visual. And as a queer person writing a fairy tale, it was important for me to work on aesthetic as well, which I'm going to talk about a little bit, I think. It was really important for me to keep some aesthetic in this show. It was important for me that it was had this foresty feel to it because I like the idea of a forest. I like the iconography. I had one person that pointed out that their fairy godmother, they needed them to be someone that uses magic that's more natural from nature. I thought that was really interesting and important as someone's need for the story itself. Um, and I think there's something really important about Cinderella not being kind of stuck in suburbia, not being stuck in kind of the cement jungle. And I'm not saying those wouldn't be important adaptations. Um, we've learned from the many adaptations of A Christmas Carol that you can do things like make Vanessa Williams Scrooge and it can still work really well. But for me, as someone who has the power to decide what happens in the world and what it looks like and how it's shaped, I really wanted that foresty feel. I really wanted that small kingdom feel. I didn't want it to be so big that, it's just sheer numbers that the prince and Cinderella have never met kind of thing. It was really important to me to honor all the things that are kind of the hallmarks of the queer experience. And I think we don't talk enough about how much aesthetic is part of that. Like if you ask a gay person about their favorite films, sometimes it's about story, but 90% of the time it's going to be a memory of how something looks visually or an important part of the story told in a visual way. So, like someone whose favorite Christmas movie is the live action Grinch might talk about Martha May Whovier. Someone whose favorite movie is Clue might be all about Miss Scarlet or Mrs. Peacock. Um, and I think I really wanted to honor that in this. I have a very specific visual look for the world, um, both for the forest and the rooms within the world. Everything kind of has more of a natural feel. Some of it is more cut away and polished, but other of it is rough hewn, kind of based upon where the person lives and things like that. There's a little less so with the costumes. Nightshade and Cobbles are very specific, and there's very specific requirements for the masquerade ball, where I have the object that replaces the glass slipper because I do think you need something. Um, Although, ironically, the Cinderella doesn't really get to run away in the same way that other Cinderellas do. And I think it's going to be a really interesting thing to see how people take that in the second act. And I'm hoping it's well, obviously. I really wanted to make something pretty. There is a place for grungy things, and I have a few different plays where grungy is a big part of it. But really, for me, it was important when looking at the narrative of Cinderella to enjoy the beauty of the story and the parts of it that I really loved and resonated with me. Um, Ideally, this is really a period piece about falling in love. And I've tried to make it something where it feels like a story about how you learn to connect with someone else to get rid of your own self doubt and fear. And that's really what I want people to take away from it. I want them to look at the beauty in it and the beauty aesthetically and of the story and really find something special in it for themselves. I've got a week until the Kickstarter comes out, a week or a little less. And I'm so excited and so nervous to share it with you. I really want you to find your place in my world, not just because I'm asking you for money, but because I think this is a really important thing. And I think there's going to be some work to do on it because once I hear people and see people, it may need a little bit of trimming here and there, but the story is really there. And it's how I want to tell it. And it's characters with dignity, it's characters being sexy and silly and romantic and dramatic, characters that are sad and characters that are happy and characters that are there to care for each other. It's not just about adapting a fairy tale. That is a part of it, obviously, because that's what I've done. But it's also about the legacy that some of these stories leaves in our lives and leave as a part of us. And I want you to be on that journey with me. Really. I've always said theater is, a collaborative art, and that's true. Costumers, directors, actors, but you need the audience. That's what makes theater in a lot of ways. That is what makes it different a lot of times from TV and film, is how intimate and interactive it is. And I want people to know that this isn't just you plunking down to see the Disney Cinderella narrative, but with two dudes or two women kissing. Because that's just not what it is. Like there was so much work that I did, and I'm really proud of it. And I hope that when you look at the Kickstarter, you can see all that work and that love, and that you want to be part of it. So thank you so much for listening to my rambling. And next week, when the Kickstarter launches, I will be here to keep talking and invite you to ask questions and to be part of the world. And I hope you have a great rest of your evening. And I'll see you soon on the internets.